I believe it all started about 5 months ago. I will never understand why such a minor incident has stuck in my memory. It was a normal Saturday morning, and in the afternoon I was taking my son Robert, 14, to a soccer game, while my wife Ronnie, Veronica, was going to take our daughter Karen, 12, to dance class. To tell the truth, I was running a little late that day, and as I was about to leave the house, I discovered that my keys weren't on the hook. Damn, I had left them on the dressing table in the bedroom while I was getting changed. Time was pressing, so I took Ronnie's keys. We both had identical keychains, so we could use each other's cars without switching keys. I called upstairs and told Ronnie she would have to use my keys, and I left. I think I heard Ronnie shout something, but as I said, I was in a hurry. As usual, Robert's team played like crazy in the first half. Yes, they were way ahead, but they wore themselves out. In the second half, their opponents came back and crushed them. In any case, the kids had fun, and that's what sports are all about. When we got home, Ronnie gave me a hard time for taking her keys. I thought her reaction was a bit over the top. After all, we have the same keys. I chalked her anger up to her maybe not hearing me when I told her my keys were in the bedroom and she should look for them. Ronnie and I have been married for 16 years. I'm 40 this year and she's 38, but she doesn't look her age. Even I, a man, can say that she's a real MILF. All the men turn to look at her when she walks into a pub, which isn't often, as she doesn't like pubs. Ronnie is one of the leading figures in the local women's club, which she attends every Monday evening, and she also belongs to a ladies' club that keeps her busy on Wednesday evenings. I love beer and chips. Every Friday evening I go to the King's Arms to get drunk. On Saturday mornings I usually sleep in, but by lunchtime I'm ready to play the role of the conscientious father again. On Saturday evenings, unless Ronnie drags me to one of her women's fundraising parties, we usually go out to see a play or have dinner at an expensive restaurant. When we get home, it's the highlight of our week, our Saturday night extravaganza. The kids stay with their grandparents every Saturday night, so Ronnie and I can be as loud as we want, and if there's one thing Ronnie loves, it's being loud when we're making love. She really enjoys Saturday nights. Of course, we often make love on weekdays, but when the kids are around, Ronnie can't completely relax. Anyway, a few weeks went by, and I had almost completely forgotten about the key incident. One afternoon, Ronnie's car broke down. A tow truck took her home, and for some reason I never understood. She handed the driver her entire set of keys, including the house keys, when she got into the house. When I got home from work, Ronnie told me what she had done, and I called the tow truck company. Johnny, one of the guys who works there, drinks at the same pub as me, and we agreed that he would remove the car key from the key ring and meet me later to give me the rest of the keys. It was around 10 o'clock when I got home. I went to the front door and put the key in the lock, but it wouldn't turn. I was using Ronnie's keys because I hadn't taken mine with me. You know how it is when you're used to a set of keys. You don't look at them, you just go by size and shape to figure out which one you need. Looking closer, I noticed that there was an extra key on Ronnie's key ring. I opened the door with the right key and forgot all about the incident. It must have been a week or so later when Ronnie and I returned from shopping. While I was taking the groceries out of the trunk, Ronnie went to open the door. I happened to notice that the first key she tried in the lock didn't work, so she took it out and inserted another one. "I did that with your keys last week," I remarked. "What's that damn key for?" Ronnie seemed to think for a moment, then said, "Oh, that's the key to my office at work. I took it off the big ring. That way I don't have to take all my keys out when I leave my office during the day." For a moment, I was stunned. I had to think about what Ronnie had just said to me. You see, Ronnie had just told me an outright lie. No ifs or buts. It was a blatant lie. But why? Veronica is the key holder at her company. Since we live fairly close to her office, she has a large set of keys to the entire complex. If the fire or security alarm goes off after hours, the police can call her to come and open the building so they can get in. I've looked at her company key ring many times, and I know it's welded. No one can remove a key from that key ring unless they cut it off with a saw and then weld it back on again. Why would she lie about a stupid key? That night, I lay in bed with my mind racing. Why would my loving wife lie to me? Maybe she just got confused and meant she took the other office key. No, Ronnie definitely said she took the key off the big ring. That's what she always calls her work keys. And she thought about what she was going to say before she answered. All sorts of ridiculous scenarios ran through my head. What could that damn key really be for? The only thing that came to mind was unthinkable. Ronnie and I were happily married, weren't we? That left me with only one option. I had to follow Ronnie and find out what she was up to. I couldn't think of many opportunities when Ronnie would be doing something she shouldn't be doing. Only Monday and Wednesday evenings. Mondays were easy to check. The WI secretary usually left copies of the minutes of her Monday meetings at our house every Tuesday afternoon. All I had to do was take them out of Ronnie's folder and check if she was on the attendance list. She was at all the meetings. The minutes also listed the start and end times of the meetings, and they seemed to match her arrival home to within a few minutes. The Wednesday Vista Club required a little more effort. The club members met at each other's homes, but fortunately, at the house where the meeting was held, the husbands usually went to the pub. Since the only decent pub in the area was the King's Arms, I could leave the children for half an hour and pop over there for a minute. As expected, when I asked them what I thought was a rather subtle question, all the husbands reported that Ronnie was there as usual. By the following Saturday, I was beginning to think I was being silly and chasing ghosts, but then Robert's football game was canceled. I was just settling down at home to watch the afternoon sports on TV when I noticed Ronnie's book. When Ronnie isn't doing charity work or playing whist, she's an avid reader. She usually takes the book she's reading with her to read while she waits for Karen, but it was lying on the damn coffee table. Of course, she could have just forgotten it. She's done that before. But when she did, she always came home and picked it up. Then I suddenly remembered the time I took Ronnie's keys that Saturday and her inexplicable anger at me for taking them. Maybe she needed that extra key on Saturday afternoon while our daughter was at dance class? I decided right then that next Saturday, I would find out if she had actually used the key. I couldn't rush over there right away because Ronnie sometimes waited in the car and might notice my car. If she thought I was spying on her, I'd be in big trouble. Luckily, there was a football tournament the following weekend that would keep young Robert busy for most of the day. But if I was going to spy on Ronnie, I had to be careful. She wouldn't appreciate finding me snooping around. I called my drinking buddy John from the garage to find a car I could use that Ronnie wouldn't recognize. John found an old clunker, a Ford Sierra that had seen better days but was still running and had a 3-month overdue MOT. For £100, he arranged for the car to be delivered to the sports club on Friday and for the keys to be left with the bartender. At 1 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, I parked near Karen's dance school and watched as Ronnie dropped her off and drove away. I followed Ronnie in the Sierra, keeping a decent distance behind her. Less than a mile later, she turned into an alleyway behind a row of shops and parked. I had to drive past her because there was nowhere to stop. But Ronnie didn't expect me to follow her, so I got lucky and she didn't notice me. I stopped at the end of the alley and watched her cross the street and enter the door at the back of the shops. She went in and disappeared. I have to be honest. I had no idea what to do next. I thought it might be a good idea to write down the license plate numbers of all the cars parked nearby. I think I had read a story where a man did that, but I didn't know what to do with the numbers. I waited about 10 minutes. Then went back to the alley and wrote down the license plate numbers of all the cars parked there. From the location of the doors, I could tell that the one she had entered led to a first-floor apartment. What do I do now? I thought. Ronnie lied to me, then went into that damn apartment. Should I jump to conclusions or wait and see what else I can find out? If she's doing what I'm afraid she's doing, confronting her without any real proof could be a big mistake. It could make her suspicious, and unfounded accusations won't do me any good if it comes to divorce. Divorce? Wait a minute, I thought. You don't know what she's doing in that apartment. But on the other hand, what if she's not doing anything wrong? Why the hell didn't she tell me she was coming here, and why did she make up that story about the key? No! Something was definitely wrong in the Kingdom of Denmark. I had to think about the children. If my Ronnie was playing hooky with some guy named Pratt, I didn't want him to be the father of my children just because I had acted rashly. I decided I wasn't going to sit around and see what else I could find out. I found a parking spot on the main road with a good view of the alley and the apartment door. I sat there fighting my emotions, wondering what the woman I loved was doing in that apartment. An hour and a half later, Ronnie came out, looked down the alley, got in her car, and drove away. I knew where Ronnie was going, so I decided to wait and see if anyone else came out of the apartment. 20 minutes later, a guy came out. He was wearing an expensive suit, and I thought I had seen him somewhere before, but I couldn't remember where. He got into a Mercedes and drove down the alley. Believing that it was him, I drove along the main road and caught up with him when he turned onto it. I then followed him until he reached a house in a more prestigious suburb of the city. After carefully noting down the address, I immediately went to the local library and found the house in the electoral register. I left the library feeling quite pleased with myself. Now I was almost certain that this guy was Reginald Edward Passmore, married to Margaret Olivier Passmore. Of course, it wasn't real proof, but I felt I had taken the first step. But by then, it was almost time to pick up my son. I was very upset by my discovery, and when we got home, I had to be very careful not to let Ronnie guess that I suspected her, which proved more difficult than I thought. Several times during the evening, she asked if everything was all right. I gathered my strength and focused on how I behaved towards her. Despite all my efforts, Saturday evening did not go as usual. On Sunday morning, I really messed up. I wanted to leave the house early, so I stupidly told Ronnie that I was going fishing with a friend from work. I've never been fishing in my life. It's not my thing to sit around all day staring at a damn river. Ronnie knows me too well and sensed something was up. She asked me a few leading questions, but in the end, I think I convinced her that we were really going to a pub by the river. Luckily, I left Sierra at the sports club because Ronnie insisted that I not take my car if I was going to be drinking. I drove to London because there are a few shops there that I've heard of that sell equipment that I thought I might need. I have to be honest with you. I was very upset at the thought that Ronnie was cheating on me, but for some reason, I liked the idea of playing private detective. You know, there's a certain satisfaction in proving that what you think is happening is actually happening. I was angry and determined to confront Ronnie. At least that's how I saw it at the time. I didn't think it would be difficult because I had read lots of stories about guys who caught their wives cheating, and it always sounded like child's play. I found a store that had pretty much everything a good detective or spy could need: miniature cameras, listening devices, everything. The only problem was that I would have to take out another damn mortgage to buy it all. I left the store feeling pretty down, but a guy who had been in the store while I was explaining to the salesperson what I needed came up to me on the street. He gave me his business card. On the back, he wrote a phone number. "Call this guy," he said. "He'll help you. He makes this equipment himself and rents it out." I thanked him and called the number on my cell phone. The guy's name was Kevin. He said he had what I needed and suggested I come right over. When I arrived, Kevin asked me a lot of questions and warned me to be careful. It was legal to record conversations on my home phone, but I had to warn everyone who used it that the phone was being tapped. Hidden cameras and microphones were illegal unless they were in my home. He suggested I use them to prove to myself what was going on. But to use them in court, I would need a handheld camera. He offered to help me get one. Damn voyeur. In any case, he gave me the equipment we thought I might need. I gave him my credit card details and went home. Of course, through King's Arms, Ronnie would be expecting me to smell of beer. I was becoming a good detective. You have to remember the little things. Now I had to get into the apartment to set up the camera and microphones. Time didn't matter, as the equipment was radio-controlled. But then I discovered that I was right. and Ronnie was onto something. When I looked at her keys that evening, the apartment key was gone. Ronnie was the same loving wife she had always been. If I hadn't seen her go into that apartment, I would never have suspected anything. The whole damn week went by, and I looked everywhere for that damn key, but I had no luck. The following Saturday, after I dropped Robert off at his football game, I drove to the dance studio, and Ronnie's car was parked nearby. She was there the next 2 Saturdays as well. Was it over, or had they just cooled off for a while? After all, was there really anything between them? I had to find out, so the following Friday I stopped by the King's Arms and asked Ronnie out to dinner. I probably drank more than I should have to work up the courage. When we finished dinner, I plucked up my courage and asked her, "Ronnie, do you still love me?" "What are you talking about, Malcolm? Of course I do." "So you have nothing to say to me?" "I don't know what you're talking about. Now please stop before you upset me." But I could see in her eyes that she was upset. I had hit a nerve. "Okay, I was just giving you a chance. But if you say nothing happened, then nothing happened." "Are you okay? I think you've had too much to drink. You're talking nonsense. Do you understand?" "I'm sorry, baby. I just have a lot on my mind, that's all." Well, that was it. She blew her chance. If things had been different, she might have told me about the apartment and why she was going there. I like to have a pint or two, so as usual, Ronnie drove us to the restaurant. On the way home, she stopped to get gas. When I got out to fill the tank, she said she would do it because I had had too much to drink. She was clearly angry with me, probably because I had put her in an awkward position. She got out and filled the tank. I sat there bored, and as you do, played with the electric window, looked in the door pocket and the glove compartment. Then, I don't know why, I pressed the little button that opens the ashtray, and bingo! Ronnie and I don't smoke, so our ashtrays are filled with smelly granules. But there, lying on top, was the damn key. I quickly closed the ashtray and looked around to see if Ronnie had noticed me. But luckily, she had already gone into the restaurant to pay. On Saturday, I drove Robert to football again, and then went to the dance studio. Ronnie's car was in the parking lot, empty, and I parked the Sierra next to it. I slipped out of the car, making sure no one was looking, and let the air out of Ronnie's front tire. Then I went back to the football game. Right after dance class, Ronnie called me on my cell phone and said she had a flat tire. I drove over to her right away and told her to take my car and go home. I would change the tire and fix the puncture, but she would have to pick up Robert on the way. As soon as Ronnie and Karen left, I took the ready spare gas canister out of my pocket and pumped up the tire. Then I drove to the local store and made a duplicate key, which I kept in the ashtray. I almost ruined everything by coming home too early. But then I remembered that I had to fix the flat tire. Even the cowboy at Quick Fit doesn't work that fast. So I popped into the King's Arms for a drink, as usual. Johnny, my friend from the garage, was there, and he started asking me why I needed a car that my wife wasn't supposed to know about. He wasn't going to give up because he thought I was on the run. In the end, I had to tell him that I thought Ronnie was cheating on me. His attitude toward me changed completely when he told me that his first wife had cheated on him and then ran away, leaving him with huge debts because she had been stealing the money he thought she was using to pay the bills. Johnny insisted that he would help me, whether I wanted him to or not. So I had to tell him everything I had found out. Johnny suggested that maybe Ronnie, suspecting that I was suspicious of her on Saturday afternoon, might have been meeting this guy at another time. He decided he would drive past the apartment every time he tested a car. Since he tested all the cars that came through the garage, that meant he would check to see if Ronnie's car was parked outside the apartment up to 10 times a day. I didn't hear from Johnny all week, and Ronnie acted normal, being affectionate. Then on Friday, John called me at work and asked me to meet him at a pub on the way home. So she met him at the apartment on Tuesday and Thursday at lunchtime and stayed for about an hour and a half. On Monday, Wednesday, and today, some other girl showed up. You need to take the day off work and find out who she is. What the hell do I care about her? I asked. You should care. Listen, Malcolm, things could go either way. First, everything will come out, you'll divorce your wife, and you'll have to start all over again. I can tell you it's not as easy as it seems. It hurts when you're cheated on. But it hurts even more when she's not there anymore. I know from experience. Second, you can try to keep her. If you decide you want to keep Veronica, all we have to do is turn this guy into his wife and tell her about his affair with another woman. And when it all comes out, I have connections, and it will be in all the local newspapers. All you have to do is make sure Ronnie reads it. When she finds out that this guy is cheating on her, she'll come back to you before you know it. This all seems a bit speculative to me. Hell, you won't know unless you try. We'll hide the thing in the apartment on Sunday at 11 a.m. sharp. Sorry. I did a little research on Pasmore. Pasmore will be at church at 11 a.m. He goes there with his family every Sunday, so we can get into the apartment while he's away. But are you sure? Trust me, I'm a mechanic. Do mechanics lie? No, don't answer that. But I've got everything ready for Sunday morning. Meet me in the garage at 10. Who's we? Don't worry, you'll see. On Sunday at 10, I arrived at the garage and saw John with another man and a gas service van. He gave me a gas worker's overalls and told me to put them on. This is Mo. He's a gas inspector. He's looking for gas leaks. We'll just go to the apartment and knock on the door. If anyone answers, we'll say there's been a report of a gas leak and ask if they can smell gas. Then Mo will wave his gas detector around and say everything's fine. If no one answers, we open the door and go in. If a neighbor stops us, Mo distracts them by talking about the gas leak. But I don't think anyone will be there. These apartments are mostly occupied by students and refugees. To his credit, Johnny seemed to know what he was doing. Mo didn't go into the apartment. He walked down the alley waving his detector. But he let Johnny and me enter the apartment without hiding. The apartment was a bit messy, only the kitchen and the largest room were livable. The other rooms were apparently used for storage, as they were filled with cardboard boxes. The large kitchen had a table and 8 chairs, a stove, a refrigerator containing milk and several bottles of cheap wine, and a locked filing cabinet. The only room suitable for living had a large table covered with a sheet. Even more cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls. On one wall hung a board or rack, also covered with a sheet. "Oh, that's interesting," John commented as we looked for a place to hide the camera and microphone. "God, is Veronica into perversions?" I turned to him. He lifted the corner of the sheet covering the board on the wall. "Not as far as I know." "Why?" "Look at this. Do you think they'd do this by numbers?" All kinds of toys and domination accessories were attached to the board. You know what I mean. Handcuffs, belts, whips, and all that stuff. It looked like there was a number under each item. "How long have you been married?" 15 or 16 years. Why? "You've been married to her for 16 years and you didn't know Veronica was into kinky stuff?" "We don't know what she's into yet. That's why we're here, to find out what she's been up to." "Well, considering all this, I think we can guess, can't we?" I looked at Johnny. He shrugged and started inserting a miniature camera into the damaged cardboard box. "This will do, and the rest can go in the box. Judging by the amount of dust, no one has looked in it for months," he said. "Look, if you stand on a chair, you can put the microphone in the vent." As I said, Johnny seemed to know what he was doing, so I did as he said. "Okay, now all that's left is the microphone in the kitchen. We can put it on the cupboard. Judging by the way it looks in here, I doubt anyone ever cleans up around here, so it won't be noticed." "Where the hell did you learn all this spy stuff, Johnny?" "That's a secret. But it was for the queen and the country, and it was better than all this gay bashing nonsense." "Were you in the army back then?" "Something like that, but you're asking too many questions, buddy." I dropped the subject. Johnny clearly didn't want to tell me, and he's a big guy, no point in upsetting him. He sent me back to the van where he installed the receivers. As far as I could tell, everything was working. But when Johnny came back down, he wasn't happy with the angle of the camera, So we went back up and adjusted it. Then we went back to the garage where Johnny moved the receivers into a small white van. He then told me to follow him to the apartment and park the van as close as possible. He told me that for convenience, he had connected the equipment to timers. Everything would be turned on from noon to 2 every day, as that was when Passmore was in the apartment. Johnny told me to take the day off work and see if I could find out who the other woman was. So on Monday, I pretended to be sick, left work at 11 and parked on the main road to watch the apartment. At exactly 12, Passmore arrived and entered the apartment. At 12:15, the Shogun pulled into the alley, a tall blonde woman got out and also entered the apartment. Again, I thought she looked familiar. But again, I couldn't figure out where I had seen her before. I tried to turn on the microphone on the receiver I had with me, but I was too far away and it couldn't pick up the signal, let alone decode it. That's the problem with all these digital devices. You need a damn good signal. At exactly 1:45 p.m., the blonde came out and got into her Shogun. I followed her and spent the rest of the day sitting near the school, then near the barber shop, then back near that damn school, and then I lost her, damn it. When I got home, I found that everything was fine, except that I was going crazy. Johnny said we should leave the van alone until Friday, and then we could pick it up and look at the week's recordings on Friday night when Ronnie thought I was at the pub. But the tension was killing me. On Wednesday, I waited for the blonde again. She followed the same pattern: school, hair salon, school. But on that day, when school closed, Shogun was still there. She didn't leave until 5 o'clock. She was standing there talking to another woman, and then I realized who she was. She was a teacher at the school, my children's school. Mrs. Gurney or something like that. Yes, that was her name. One of my children's teachers was playing hooky with that bastard Passmore. That's definitely not normal. You expect high moral standards from teachers, at least when they're teaching your children. You know, I think that upset me more than Ronnie cheating on me. Damn, I was really angry. Anyway, I followed Mrs. Gurney home and found out her address. Ronnie scolded me for being late for dinner, then gave me a big hug and kiss. If I find out you went to the pub instead of dinner, you're in big trouble, she said. That's why she kissed me. She was checking to see if I smelled of alcohol. It wasn't because she loved me. Strange, but that night we went to bed and had the best sex we'd had in years. Ronnie was all mine. It was like our honeymoon. I think she sensed that I wasn't as into it as I should have been, but I played my part until the end. On Friday evening, I met Johnny at the pub. We went and replaced the tapes in the van, and then drove to the garage. There, we put the tape from the kitchen into the tape recorder and sat waiting with bated breath. Nothing. Not a sound. We looked at each other in confusion, and then Johnny put the tape from the other room in. Again, nothing. "Let's try this damn tape in slow motion," said John. Again, nothing. We couldn't understand. What was going on? All the tapes were blank. But on Sunday, everything worked fine. The tapes played, we even rewound them. But there was nothing on them. In desperation, we called Kevin. After I vented all my anger at him, he agreed to come over. When he arrived, he listened to the tapes and watched the video. "No signal," he declared, then asked if we had set everything up and checked it correctly. We assured him that everything was fine and showed him the tape we had recorded in the room on Sunday. "I don't understand," he said. "We need to go and check." We went to the apartment, and Kevin opened the back doors of the van so everyone could see him checking the equipment. "Everything seems to be connected correctly," he said. "It should work." Then he stood there and studied the back of the shops. Apparently satisfied, he began walking down the alley. "What's behind that wall?" he asked, pointing to a tall wall that formed the opposite side of the alley from the stores. I shrugged, but Johnny said it was one of the university buildings. "Oh, interesting," Kevin said, pulling a device that looked like a portable radio out of his toolbox. He turned the knobs a few times, then said, "Well, that's it, we're screwed. I wonder what those idiots are up to." Seeing the confusion on our faces, he continued, "There are so many radio signals coming from there that they could jam the entire BBC. My equipment can't get through all this junk. They'd better be careful. They're using illegal frequencies." "So this equipment won't work?" "Not unless we jam those idiots, and only the post office can do that." "Can't we complain about them?" I suggested. "Yes, I understand." "Excuse me, Mr. Postman, their illegal radio signals are interfering with our illegal radio signals. Besides, they may have a license to use those frequencies. I'm not sure, but I think they may be in a zone reserved for research." Kevin started turning off the equipment in the van. "Sorry, guys, you're out of luck. I'd better take all this with me." "What are we going to do now?" I asked. "The only thing you can do. Get in there and catch her red-handed on a handheld camera. You'll have to do it eventually. I told you you couldn't use any illegal means in court." Kevin gathered his equipment, and then Johnny and I went to the King's Arms to drown our sorrows. We made a plan to get the equipment back from the apartment on Sunday morning. That would cost me another £50 for Mo. So what had we achieved? Absolutely nothing. I lost £200, plus what I'd have to pay Kevin, and I knew no more than I did at the start. I went home feeling very depressed, and Ronnie noticed. I think she even noticed that I hadn't had my usual fun, because she was very nice to me in bed that night. Saturday passed as usual. I checked, and Ronnie didn't go to the apartment. In the evening, we went to a show and were supposed to have a good time, but I think I ruined it. Saturday's workout wasn't as fun as usual, and we went to bed pretty early for a Saturday night. On Sunday, I told Ronnie I was going fishing again. She said she was worried about me because I looked depressed and didn't want me to go, but when Johnny pulled up, she kissed me and told me to have a good time. When I got in the car, John was full of enthusiasm. He had gotten some new information about Passmore. It turned out that he wasn't English, but an immigrant from Eastern Europe. A few years ago, he had escaped from a Polish cargo ship. He was given asylum and changed his name when he got citizenship. He was supposedly an entrepreneur, but according to Johnny, he was involved in the underworld. Apparently, the police weren't sure he was clean, but the only information they had pointed to the sex industry. That was news I could have done without. To put it mildly, it didn't help my depression, which got worse in the days that followed. We picked up our things from the apartment and went to the King's Arms. I think I got home around 3, but I couldn't remember. On Tuesday afternoon, Johnny called and said that no one had been to the apartment on Monday or that day. On Friday at the pub, he told me that it looked like no one had been to the apartment all week. One afternoon, there was a van outside, and Johnny drove past and saw a guy loading boxes into it, but that was around 4 o'clock. Johnny thought he'd seen the van in the alley before, usually in the evening. It seemed to be over. Over the next few weeks, Ronnie didn't show up at the apartment. I was terribly relieved. The suspicion that my beautiful wife was cheating on me was a heavy burden. I loved her and didn't want to lose her. As always, Ronnie behaved like a devoted wife. In the evenings, I could see her looking at me out of the corner of my eye. I wondered if she suspected that I knew about her affairs. She would look at me for a while, then shrug and go back to her book. 3 weeks later, on Wednesday, right after dinner, Johnny called me, sounding excited. He said he had seen Ronnie and a woman named Gurney outside the apartment. There was another woman with them, then Passmore came out, walked over to the other woman, kissed her, and then kissed Ronnie and the woman named Gurney. Then Ronnie and Gurney got into their cars, and Passmore and the third woman got into his Mercedes. John couldn't follow them because he had to return the test car. I didn't like it. What were they up to, a threesome? To be honest, I was in complete shock. I worked so poorly for the rest of the day that I was told not to come in on Thursday. So I spent the day wandering around the house. To be honest, I got a little drunk. Ronnie came home from work and bustled around me for a while. A little after 6, she dropped a bombshell. She said she had to go to a women's club meeting. I knew again that this wasn't true. I had been keeping a close eye on her diary and appointment calendar. When I checked in the morning, There were no appointments scheduled for that day, but it was on the calendar. I know I didn't miss it. Ronnie must have written it down after she got home from work. Ronnie dressed up as she usually did for the women's club. Quite conservative clothes, not the kind women usually wear when going on a romantic date. But by this time, I was sure she would soon be without clothes. After she left, I told the children with tears in my eyes that I was taking them to their grandparents because I had to go out. As soon as I dropped the kids off, I called Kevin and Johnny and asked them to meet me near the apartment. It was already 8:30 when we quietly opened the apartment door and tiptoed up the stairs. The kitchen door was open and the room was empty. The door to the other room was closed and we could hear voices. We couldn't make out what they were saying, but I got the impression that they were foreigners. Kevin got his camera ready, and we nodded to each other to signal that we were ready. We had a plan, and we intended to execute it with military precision. I was supposed to burst into the room and confront Ronnie. Kevin was supposed to follow me and film everything he could before they recovered from the shock of our sudden appearance. John was our muscle. He was supposed to make sure that Passmore or anyone else didn't attack us. At Kevin's signal, we sprang into action. I opened the door so quickly that I almost fell face down. As happens in such cases, everything around me seemed to slow down. I looked around the room and saw Ronnie standing with a foot-long cane in her hand. But no, it was a pointer, and it was pointing at a board hanging on the wall that was covered in scribbles. The 6 or 7 frightened people who had been sitting in chairs when we entered were now diving under the table. For a moment, the room was silent. "Malcolm Andrews, what the hell are you doing?" Veronica demanded. "Here I am, sleeping in the spare bedroom. Veronica barely speaks to me. God knows how long it will take her to calm down." It turned out that Veronica's old school friend, who was now Passmore's wife, had asked Ronnie and Jenny Gurney to teach some of his employees English. I knew them because they had been at Ronnie's school reunion last year. Passmore was in the mail-order sex toy business. Apparently, he liked to hire people from his own country. Recently, the immigration authorities had arrested all his employees because they didn't have work permits. Cheap labor for Passmore, and his compatriots thought he was a damn hero. Passmore was forced to hire new workers. They didn't speak a word of English, so Ronnie was there on Thursday evening trying to give them a crash course. Why did Veronica hide this from me and lie? Well, that's the stupidest part of the whole story. It's all because of the money Passmore was paying her. You see, I've always dreamed of visiting the Grand Canyon in the U.S. Veronica planned to surprise me with a trip there for my birthday. She thinks that if she had told me about the extra money she was earning, I would have insisted that she spend it on the children and herself. In the end, that's what the money was spent on. Veronica and the kids went to Disney World in Florida. When they come back on Saturday, I hope Veronica will let me move back into the master bedroom. Why didn't I go with them to Florida? Well, I needed 100 euros for Sierra. 100 for Mo? 200 for Kevin? Need I go on? I really don't know when Ronnie will forgive me for not trusting her. I guess I'll just have to wait and see.